The nightmare always ended the same. The jungle ripping apart, the horse screaming. Robert Kessler jolted awake in the dark. He'd stumbled to his desk again. The old monitor, the only light. On it, a rescue's weekly post.
The scar. It ran exactly the same as Sargento's.
He pulled the only photo he'd kept from the war out of a drawer. Himself in '68, next to a young bay horse.
It can't be the same horse. Not after 43 years. But the photo was dated yesterday. If there was even a chance, he hadn't said the horse's name out loud in 40 years. He wouldn't start now.
He pulled on his faded olive jacket, the unit patches fraying but still there. He folded the old photo into his pocket and grabbed his cane. The pickup rumbled to life before dawn. Robert didn't look back. The old Ford ate up the miles. On the passenger seat, the photograph of the scarred bay gelding lay face up, a question he couldn't let go.
43 years, and the scar was in the same place. What are the odds?
His leg throbbed in time with the engine. He hadn't taken the cane out of the truck. He just drove. His mind kept throwing him back to that mud-slick jungle trail. The horse under him never shied, never stumbled.
He trusted that animal more than any man in his platoon.
Then the jungle ripped open. The world went white and orange, and he was on the ground, the horse screaming. The next thing he knew was the rhythm of hooves. The horse was under him again, carrying him through smoke and gunfire.
5 miles. He carried me 5 miles. If it's really him, I can't let him die in a stranger's pen.
The odometer clicked another 50. The plains stretched on, and Robert fell silent again, chasing a ghost across 3 states. The truck turned off the highway at a weathered sign. Sanctuary Rescue, 5 miles. Robert's hands tightened on the wheel. The gate was simple, split rail, a hand-painted plaque reading Sanctuary. He killed the engine and just sat. A woman in a flannel shirt walked out of the barn, wiping her hands. She didn't smile.
Can I help you?
Robert pulled the photograph from his pocket and held it up. His hand was steady.
You came a long way for a horse that might not be anything to you.
She thinks I am another ghost chaser. She doesn't know.
She led him past the barn to the paddock fence. 2 younger ranch hands leaned nearby, watching. An old bay gelding stood alone by a feed bucket, head down. A scar ran thick across his right shoulder. Robert stopped breathing.
We pulled him from a kill pen 6 years ago. He's 47, one of only 23 cavalry horses brought back from Vietnam. Most people forgot they ever existed. The gate's unlatched. Go on if you need to, but he's old and he's earned his quiet. Don't expect him to remember anything.
Robert pushed the gate wide and stepped into the soft dirt. The cane wobbled, but he leaned into the limp.
43 years, and he couldn't speak the name. Not even to himself. Say it. Just say it. Sargento.
The word cracked out of him, a dry rasp that barely carried across the paddock. The old gelding didn't twitch. The steady rhythm of chewing continued.
He doesn't remember. 43 years, and he doesn't even flinch. I drove across 3 states for a ghost.
Then his bad leg buckled without warning. The cane snapped sideways, and Robert went down hard on one knee, pain shooting up his hip.
Get up. Don't let them see you like this. Don't let them see the old man who chased a photograph.
The chewing stopped. In the sudden quiet, dust motes hung in the golden light. The horse lifted his head. Sargento's ears pricked forward, his soft eyes fixed on the man in the dirt. Ben and Maggie froze at the fence, hands half raised. Sargento took a step, then another. The old gelding moved not quickly, but deliberately. Each hoof pressed into the dust, like a sentence being written. Ben's hand went to his mouth. Maggie whispered something that wasn't words. Neither of them breathed. Robert couldn't move. The cane lay beside him, useless. The horse closed the distance. Sargento stopped inches away, lowered his gray muzzle, and pressed his forehead against Robert's chest. Hard, deliberate, In that pressure was the echo of a jungle clearing where the same horse had propped up his boy against the same beating heart. Robert's chest heaved. A sound tore out of him that had no language, only 40 years of silence breaking open.
You remember.
He buried his face in the horse's unwashed mane and wept like a wounded boy. Karen let the tears fall. She didn't wipe them. Behind her, Ben and Maggie were already crying. They had witnessed something that hadn't happened in 43 years, and it didn't need a word of explanation. For a long while, Robert didn't move. Sargento stood over him like a sentinel, breath warm on the back of his neck. Karen approached with a tin cup of water. She set it beside the fallen cane, saying nothing.
He hasn't let anyone that close in 6 years. Not without pinning his ears. What did you do?
I fell. That's what he always did when I was down. He'd press his head into me, keep me awake.
Robert's hand moved to the horse's hip, where a faded brand still showed under the dust. He traced it with a shaking finger.
That's his cavalry brand. They marked all of them, the unit that no one talks about. Only a handful made it home.
Forgotten. Just like the soldiers. They sent the horses back and then erased them.
He looked up at Karen. His voice was sand, but it held.
I can't leave him again. I won't.
Then don't. We have a small cabin. It's nothing fancy, but you'll be near him.
Robert had been at the sanctuary 3 weeks, still speaking more to the horse than to people. The quiet kept his demons at bay, but only just. One night, a truck skidded to a stop by the barn. A man in his 60s stumbled out, trembling, eyes wild. Karen was already there.
He's having an episode. I don't know how to reach him.
Robert didn't think. He handed Karen his cane and led the trembling man into the stall where Sargento stood.
See this horse? Back in '68, he carried me 5 miles through gunfire. He put his head just here, and he kept me from bleeding out.
The man's breathing slowed. Sargento, as if understanding, lowered his head to the man's shoulder and stood motionless. Karen stood in the shadows, one hand over her mouth, watching Robert speak. She had never heard his voice carry so much.
He's not the only one carrying a war inside.
I've been trying to start a program for vets. I never had anyone who understood the horses like you. Will you help me?
Robert looked at his hands, still shaking. Then he nodded. Something was shifting. Something he hadn't let himself feel since the jungle.
Write it down, Robert. Every detail you've been swallowing for 40 years.
He hadn't written a thing since a field letter in '68. The blank page felt like an ambush waiting.
He wrote the first line, then stopped. The memory of that jungle dawn and the screaming tore through him like shrapnel.
The screaming. He'd pushed it down so deep he'd almost believed it was someone else's war.
His hand shook so badly the pen left chicken scratch grooves. Karen found him later, head buried in the old cavalry blanket.
The vet was here this morning. Sargento's kidneys are failing. He doesn't have much time.
Robert knelt in the straw, pressing his forehead to the horse's ribs. The familiar heartbeat was fainter now.
I'll finish the book, boy. I swear it. They'll know what you did.
The pages stacked up slowly on his desk, each word a step back into the jungle he'd run from for decades.
And every night Sargento held on, as if he knew a story needed its ending.
The final sentence came on a Tuesday afternoon. Robert lifted his hands from the keyboard and stared at the stack of pages, 240 of them, and every one cost him sleep.
He ran his thumb over the title page. The horse that remembered me. He'd known the title before he wrote the first word.
He carried the manuscript to Karen in the barn office. She opened it and read the first line aloud, then stopped. Her eyes filled.
It's all here. The ambush, the 5 miles, the brand. You've given him back his name, Robert.
But that same morning, the vet had come again. Sargento had turned 50, a lonely milestone for a forgotten cavalry horse. But his body was failing. The old gelding stood with his head low, drinking water that his body couldn't keep. The vet said weeks, not months. Then Robert's own cough worsened. Advanced lung cancer, untreatable. The doctor gave him months.
He dodged bullets and shrapnel. Now his own body was the ambush.
Robert moved a cot into the stall. He wouldn't leave Sargento now. The manuscript went to a small publisher in Austin with a short letter. Publish it if you can. Just make sure they know his name. Robert Kessler. 3 weeks after the letter arrived, a small cardboard box came to the sanctuary. Karen carried it into the barn like it was a live foal. Robert opened it with hands that barely obeyed the brain anymore. The cover was a simple silhouette, horse and soldier under a low sun.
They're printing 10,000. It's already backordered. Veterans groups are calling from everywhere.
Robert didn't have the breath to answer. He just pressed his fingers to the ink, then looked up at the stall where Sargento stood, gray and thin but still standing.
He can't read it, but he knows. That head pressing into my chest. He's been writing his own part for 43 years.
That evening, headlights lined the driveway. Men and women with flat expressions and quiet hands filed out, veterans who'd heard the story through the clinic grapevine. They lit cheap candles and stood at the paddock fence in silence, while Sargento, haltered, stood beside Robert's wheelchair. No one spoke a prayer. They just watched.
We're almost home, boy.
Sargento turned his head and lay down slowly in the straw, a deep grunt escaping him. Robert, with Karen's help, lowered himself beside the horse. The two of them lay together, the book face up on the stall floor, and for the first time in months, Robert's breathing sounded easy. Sargento's stillness told him. Robert pressed his forehead to the horse's neck and wept without sound. They buried him behind the barn. The stall stood empty, halter hanging on the door. Robert sat in the barn, manuscript on lap. He stared at the halter for hours. On Friday, Maggie found him in the stall. He'd slipped away. The doctor called it heart failure.
He looked peaceful. The book was still in his hands.
Karen placed the memoir on his chest and closed his faded olive jacket. She didn't wipe her eyes. They left him where he lay, the book on his chest, until the hearse arrived after dark. Maggie lit a candle in the stall. Sargento's halter hung on the door, and the silence was heavy. His cane hung on the fence post, the forage cap resting on top. The chair in the barn sat empty. The two of them were gone. But the book lay open on the ground, the story not yet finished. They buried Robert beside Sargento in the small field. A wooden cross, a stone marker with a horse. Veterans and staff stood silent.
The horse remembered me. Not the war, not the pain. Just the boy who needed a ride home.
The first printing sold out in 3 days. Donations came from every state. A news crew arrived. The story of the soldier and his horse spread faster than anyone expected.
We just wanted to give them a few good months. Now everyone knows their names.
I used to think we were just keeping old horses alive. Turns out they were keeping us.
Dog tags appeared on Sargento's marker, a flag on Robert's cross. Strangers left letters.
She'd ordered a new sign, but Robert never saw the proof. He would have said it was too much.
The grass on the graves was still fresh, but the paddocks were full of horses and hope. The book lay open on Karen's desk, pages worn and smudged. The story wasn't over yet. On a Sunday in spring, Karen cut the ribbon. The new sign read Sargento's Sanctuary, and it caught the sun.
The Robert Kessler program will keep going. The horses remember, and we will too.
We never had so many vets asking for stalls. They don't want to talk. They just want to be near the horses.
A child sat on the stone bench between the graves, reading aloud from the memoir, though no one was listening but the horses. Dog tags still hung on the stone marker, clinking in the breeze. Letters tucked into the grass. Sunrise found the two graves every morning, the light touching them first, as if the field itself remembered. The cane stayed on the fence post. The forage caps stayed on top. No one moved them. In the paddock, a horse's eye reflected the sunset, calm, ancient, holding everything that had been given back. The framed photo hung in the barn office, a gray soldier and a scarred horse, forehead to chest. The moment that started it all, the horse that remembered me. His name was Sargento, and he remembered years later. The sanctuary still smelled of hay and leather. Veterans came in waves, each carrying a silence that didn't need translation. A young Marine, not born when Robert was drafted, sat by the paddock with the memoir on his knee. He hadn't spoken in days, but the horse stood close.
We tell them about Sargento first, then about the man who drove across 3 states for a horse that remembered, that always breaks the quiet.
The book was now translated into 7 languages. A sentence near the end had become a promise veterans tattooed on their arms. The old photo of Robert and Sargento hung in every stall. The rescue office had become a small museum of carried men and the horses that brought them back.
We get letters from kids who never met him. They say they want to be brave like the man who never stopped believing in one horse.
The old gelding's eye reflected the sunset, just like it did every evening. Calm, ancient, unchanged.
Sunrise found the 2 graves, untouched and visited. The stone bench worn smooth by hands that came to sit. The cane and the cap still hung on the fence. No one had dared take them down. They had become part of the sanctuary's breath. And the story, it didn't end. It just waited for someone else's quiet to break.
We've outgrown the old barn. The board's asking if we should move to a larger property, but I keep thinking, this dirt is where they buried him.
We could build another wing, the Kessler wing, but we'd need to cut into the east pasture, Sargento's favorite spot.
That tree line is where the old gelding stood every morning. You can't pave over it. You just can't.
Then we do what Robert would have done. We make the hard choice. We turn down the land grant. We stay small.
A quarter of our funding walked out the door, but the ghost horses would still have their ground.
That afternoon, a veteran they hadn't seen in years walked in with a copy of the memoir. He held it like a life raft.
We're not going anywhere. You can sit with him as long as you need.
The horse's eye caught the evening light, and the man finally let go. No words, just a long breath, and the sound of hooves shifting in dirt. The cane and the cap still hung on the fence, and in that light, the choice didn't feel like a sacrifice. It felt like remembering, and somewhere, in a stall, a horse turned his head toward the gate, as if he knew another quiet was about to break. A registered letter arrived on a Tuesday. Karen read it twice, her face draining. A development corporation had filed to rezone the neighboring acreage, and they wanted the sanctuary's land too.
They're offering us a payout, enough to move the whole operation, but they pave over the field, the graves.
They can't ask us to dig them up. She's been dead 4 years, and I still can't walk past that pasture without hearing her voice.
We could fight it, but it'll cost everything we have in legal fees. The horses will pay the price.
The whole reason Robert stayed was because of that dirt. Not the buildings, the dirt.
That evening, the old gelding's great-grandson, a young bay with the same soft eye, stood in the east pasture, grazing where Sargento had.
I made a promise to Robert that I'd keep this place. I am not selling. Not for any check.
The young horse lifted his head and looked toward the graves. The sunset caught his eye just as it had caught his ancestors. They filed the injunction the next morning, draining the sanctuary's savings. The cane on the fence seemed to watch, its strap fraying but still hanging. The horse that remembered me lay open on the office desk, a page marked with Robert's description of the east pasture. The fight was just beginning.
Our lawyer says the developer is arguing the graves are unregistered. They claim there's no legal cemetery, so we have no standing.
Unregistered? There are 2 crosses and a stone marker with a horse on it. People have been leaving letters there for years.
Robert's memoir described the east pasture like a deed. Paragraph 14, the field where a horse first lay down, and a man found his peace. Could that hold?
We could file for historical designation, A veterans' memorial ground, but it needs testimony. Veterans who knew them. We'd have to go public with everything.
The quiet ones won't want cameras. But I've seen men who haven't spoken in years break when they touch that scar. They'll talk.
The young bay horse walked the fence line, and for a moment the light struck his shoulder, highlighting a faint scar from a barbed wire, a mark that had nothing to do with war, but echoed an old promise.
I'll call every veteran who ever wrote us. If we lose this ground, losing Sargento's sanctuary is just the headline. We lose the story.
The letters on the barn wall seemed to rustle with a low breeze. Hundreds of signatures, most from people who had never seen the horses, but believed. The cane hung by its strap, and the cap sat unmoved. The choice was already made, the cost already counted, and somewhere between the injunction and the hearing, a federal judge agreed to read a story about a boy and a horse, written by a man who had nothing left to prove. The judge's clerk set the memoir on the bench. For an hour, the courtroom was silent, except for turning pages. When the judge looked up, her eyes were wet.
She read the part where Robert described the east pasture. She read it aloud to the court, the field where a horse first lay down and a man found his peace.
The developer's lawyers tried to argue it was fiction, but the judge said, "This is testimony. This is a man's soul."
The judge granted historical designation. The east pasture became Kessler Memorial Ground, protected in perpetuity. The developer's petition was dismissed.
They can't touch them. Not ever. She'll rest here forever, and so will he.
The old gelding's great-grandson stood at the fence line, his eye catching the same sunset. The scar on his shoulder was a shadow, but the bloodline held. The memoir's final chapter, written by Karen after Robert's passing, included the judge's ruling. It sold another 100,000 copies.
The Robert Kessler program now has a waiting list. Veterans come here because they heard a horse can carry what they can't say.
The cane still hung on the fence. The cap still rested atop. Nothing had moved, but everything had changed. And in the paddock, the young horse lowered his head to a trembling veteran, pressing his forehead gently against the man's chest, a gesture that needed no translation. The plaque was bronze, small enough to go unnoticed, heavy enough to hold a name that had almost slipped through history.
I used to think we were saving horses. Now I know the horses are the ones who've been saving us all along.
We got a letter from a woman who adopted Sargento's great-granddaughter. She sent a photo. The filly has the same scar-shaped blaze on her shoulder.
The bloodline's still carrying. That's not a coincidence. That's the story, insisting on being told.
The young horse's eye caught the sun, and for an instant, the old gelding was there. The same patience, the same promise.
We've been gifted a grant from a Veterans Foundation. They want to establish the Robert Kessler Fellowship, training combat medics in equine therapy.
The cane and the cap remained where they had hung for years. Now a small bronze marker beside them read, Sargento, 1968 to 2020. He remembered. A veteran who had been silent for a decade stood beside the graves. He laid a set of dog tags on Sargento's stone. He didn't speak, but his wife said later he'd slept through the night for the first time since coming home. The young horse nuzzled the veteran's shoulder. The gesture was unmistakable. The horse that remembered me now sat in 24 languages. But the only translation that ever mattered was the one between a scarred horse and a broken soldier.
The fellowship's first class arrived this morning. Combat medics who want to learn how a horse can reach a place that medicine can't.
One of them, a young woman with sergeant stripes, knelt beside the young bay horse. She touched the scar on its shoulder and started to cry.
Every class starts the same. They find the scar and understand. No one has to explain.
They'll carry Robert's story into the field now. The horse that remembered is training the next generation of healers.
The memoir lay open on a bench, wind turning its pages to the passage Robert had written about forgiveness. Someone had underlined it in pencil. Sunrise found the two graves as it always did. The dog tags and letters had multiplied, fanning out in the grass like a congregation.
She stopped at the fence post every morning. The cap was sun-bleached now, the cane's strap a thread, but they held.
In the paddock, the young horse turned his head, and for a moment, the light caught the scar and the eye together, the promise of a brand, the memory of a war, and the quiet that follows. The book had sold over 2 million copies, but the only copy that truly mattered was the one on the chest of a dead soldier in a stall that morning, and somewhere, in the quiet of the sanctuary, a scarred gelding's bloodline grazed on the grass that saved him. The story had become a field, and the field was full. The graves sank very slightly each season, but the wildflowers came back thicker every spring. Someone always left a new stone on Sargento's marker. The cane and the cap had become part of the fence. Children on school tours asked if the soldier was still there, and the answer was always the same. Yes, in the horses.
She still read from the memoir every Sunday on the stone bench. The last line was always the same, and her voice never wavered.
She hung a new set of dog tags on the stone. A young medic had left them, saying the horse's story saved his platoon leader.
A crayon drawing lay tucked in the memoir's pages, a child's sketch of a horse with a star on its shoulder and a stick figure holding a cane. A horse's eye caught the dawn, calm as still water. In its depth was every quiet that had been broken and every voice that had found its way back. A young veteran stood beside a scarred shoulder, not speaking, not crying, just breathing. The horse leaned in. The horse that remembered me still sold in the gift shop. The cover was unchanged. The title was a promise. Sunset settled on the two graves, and a young horse grazed beside them, as if waiting for an old friend to wake. And the world kept turning. But inside that small Texas sanctuary, a war was over, a promise was kept, and a horse never stopped remembering. The morning light touched the two graves first, as it always did, before it reached the barn. The cane and the cap had become part of the weather, bleached and frayed, but still upright. A copy of the memoir lay on the stone bench, its pages open to the title page, where the horse's silhouette caught the dawn. In the paddock, a horse's eye reflected the sun, and a scar stood out against the bay coat, like a signature. A young veteran stood with the horse, his hand on the scar, not speaking. The horse pressed its forehead to his chest. The sanctuary was quiet, the kind of quiet that holds 1,000 stories. The stones on Sargento's marker had been worn smooth by fingers that came to touch his name, and the wildflowers grew thicker each spring, as if the ground itself wanted to remember. In the eye of the young horse was the whole story. A jungle, a scar, a man who drove across 3 states, and a promise that never ended. And somewhere in the quiet, a horse lowered his head to a broken man, and the world healed a little more.